Good evening and welcome to part 2, chapter 6 in The Secret Team. I am reading, "It shall be the duty of the agency to advise, to coordinate, to correlate, and evaluate and disseminate, and to perform services of common concern." Let me read the page, a little bit of the page section, or that line. If more time and much more money and effort were spent in correlating and evaluating this type of information, and then in making proper distribution of that product, we would know a lot more about the rest of the world than we do now. And what we know would be based upon solid, supportable fact and not someone's estimate. The work of intelligence professionals, although hindered by the misplaced emphasis on special operations, has accomplished remarkable things. The division of operating funds to clandestine activities has been serious, but it is almost insignificant when weighed against the losses which have taken place because of overemphasis on security. If the legislators of this country and if the general public could only know the things which intelligence has learned and which could be used to keep the free world versus communist world struggle in proper perspective. I know. We could be confident in our achievements, proud of our success and understanding of international affairs. One of the best examples of how much we have been able to accomplish in the field of intelligence in this field of aerial reconnaissance. The Iron Curtain Doctrine played right into the hands of the aerial reconnaissance intelligence system. Not long after Churchill had sealed off Europe, the curtain was extended all the way across from the Arctic Sea on the one end across Europe. Sorry. Thence across Greece and Turkey under the northern tier, including Iran, Pakistan, and India, and on the Pacific Ocean, skirting the bamboo curtain south of China. With the communist world thus neatly hemmed in, the intelligence community was given the task of penetrating this curtain as far as they could. One of the first things done was the establishment of a perimeter flying capability. At a busy airport just outside of Frankfurt, Germany, and on the nearby Wiesbaden airport, an assorted fleet of planes was accumulated. These planes had ability to fly for miles along the border of the Iron Curtain, taking pictures of the denied areas by slant range of oblique photography. I'm just laughing because they have actual evidence and facts that they were taking pictures of these places and then they're denying it. That's why it's funny. These planes were also equipped with electronic intelligence equipment designed to listen to as many wavebands of information as possible. All of this was taped and read out when the plane landed. At that time, there was a close relationship between the intelligence units in the field and the psychological warfare offices that were spread through the European command. The psychological warfare folks wanted to use these same planes to drop leaflets into the denied areas. I'm laughing at aliens because they're telling us that we have no clue what we're doing down here. It's like bullcrap. This is all bullcrap. It's like a comedy show to them. They would get together with the CIA units and with the meteorological offices along the routes to be flown to study wind currents. When they found a favorable wind, they would send out a plane that was going to take pictures and listen for the electronic information and then piggyback their equipment and leaflets aboard. Sometimes they would carry these leaflets for long distances into the communist world, and at other times the fickle currents would swirl around and drop them in all the wrong places. In the world of gray secrecy, one idea begets another, and soon the psychological warfare people were tying leaflets to small balloons and letting them fly deep into the denied areas, wafted by the winds and a small amount of hydrogen in each balloon. The small balloon phase did not last long. The weatherman with whom these psychological warriors were working told them about the huge weather balloons they sent up regularly for high altitude weather analysis. This opened new vistas and the potential of huge balloons carrying thousands of leaflets deep into the heart of Russia captured the imagination of these clandestine operators. Soon the CIA was using more weather balloons than the weather services, and they were launching them in every turn of the wind, hoping to sprinkle all sorts of leaflets behind the Iron Curtain. Meanwhile, border flying was getting more sophisticated, and some of the most modern planes in the Air Force and the Navy had been converted to this legal border snooping. These aircraft, modified for long flights and equipped with electronic sensing equipment and other gear, would leave primary bases in Germany or England, flying to forward bases in Norway, Greece, Turkey for refueling, and then fly border skirting routes to gather information. Well, you know, today in the lesson, it was the laugh. You're supposed to laugh when you're angry. So we're laughing. Some of the most bizarre headlines of the 50s were made by the loss of some of these planes, which strayed too close to Soviet territory or became lost in a wind shift that took place in bad weather and then shot down the Soviet fighters. Although border flying, if properly carried out, was perfectly legal, attempts were made to keep these flights secret, and all kinds of cover stories were created to attempt to explain the mission of these units. At times, a marginal penetration was flown in an attempt to photograph some target or to get a rise out of some suspected radar that was known to be in the area and not been pinpointed. Other flights were flown in the Berlin corridor utilizing hidden cameras and concealed electronic equipment. But none of these efforts were really big game. It's all the same as in Hollywood too, by the way. It's so bizarre. It's so stupid. The balloon projects led to a strange development. It was learned that this high altitude winds over the Soviet Union blew from east to west, and that they were reasonably predictable. Very large high altitude sounding balloons were tested on launches from the Pacific areas that were relocated over the Atlantic and even over the Northern American after having drifted across Asia. The next step was to equip these huge balloons with cameras and other sensing devices. This whole project was an extension of the other border and sounding projects and seemed to offer potentialities not found before. A large number of these very large balloons were launched carrying cameras and other devices. Some of them made the trip and were recovered. Others fell in the Soviet Union, and others just circled around, coming down almost anywhere. The information gathered by such unpredictable devices was at best of very little use. No one knew ahead of time when to activate the cameras, and even if they could have been activated or in some predictable schedule, the weather was a serious factor. But these strange spy balloons did serve a real and most meaningful purpose. They had softened up the authorities to whom the ST would turn to make the next request by laying a foundation for covert border crossing. Kind of like how I'm going to do, like, we're going to call the cops on that kid this morning who is casing the neighborhood for violent abuse to the citizens of this county. Once border crossing had become accepted, even though it had been accomplished on the wings of the unpredictable winds of the upper altitudes, it was not as difficult to present a program for a better upper altitude information gathering system. See, he hasn't met someone like me yet. The truth is they're doing all these things to you all. You just don't realize it. I do, and I battle them, and I take them out. And every time I win. And that's the beauty of it. Thus, all that had been done with aircraft leaflets, psychological warfare, electronic equipment, and cameras came together in the U2 project. Like so many things that the ST has done, there was not a plan so much as it was that opportunity knocked and the team took it from there. The Air Force had a very successful early jet fighter called the F-80. As the F-80 got older, the other types of planes and newer equipment seriously outdated. The Lockheed Corporation manufacturer, the F-80, came up with an F-90 and more advanced version of the tried and true F-80. But as so often happens, the timing was not just right, and the Air Force did not order the F-90. There were several other planes in the air at the time, and the newer Century series planes were on the way. However, Lockheed had well done with the F-90 and had made a trainer that had the plane known as the T-33, which outsold all others at that time. At the same time, Lockheed had a successful had been successful in selling an F-94 interceptor to the Air Force for the Air Defense Command. So Lockheed dropped the F-90, but Kelly Johnson, the shrewd vice president of Lockheed, hated to see all that work and development effort go by the wayside. He made one more pitch to the Air Force. He proposed that the highly modified glider version of the F-90 with a high-altitude engine would make a superior altitude reconnaissance aircraft. He brought his high-powered, very successful briefing team to the Pentagon and gave his pitch to the Air Force operations. The Air Force was sold on the idea, and his reconnaissance personnel was delighted at the prospect of having a special all-reconnaissance plane developed for once rather than having a covert other types and planes for that purpose. But as this hot briefing worked its way up through the channels, it became apparent that the Air Force could not relocate the funds to purchase a reconnaissance plane. The Air Force did not have anything it could do with the plane at the time. It was one thing to take a strategic bomber, B-9047, from the Strategic Air Command and fly it along a border in the open skies for the purpose of getting some electronic information input, but it was an entirely different deal to develop a brand new plane for a mission which at best would be clandestine except in the time of war. And even then would be most hazardous. However, many of the reconnaissance officers of the Air Force had been working closely with the CIA on these border flights, and they knew men in the CIA who might want to hear about Kelly Johnson's proposed new glider. A top-level Air Force team gave the CIA a briefing on the plane, and during the briefing, it was brought out that the ultra-high altitude plane had the capability to fly across Russia at an altitude that would most likely be above the ability of the Russians to do anything about. Even if they did happen to find out it was there, the rest is history. The Air Force agreed to develop the plane, and the CIA agreed to operate it. As a result, most of the money, the people, and the facilities that went into this project were contributed by the Air Force. The CIA operated the project as a peacetime operation. This is a classic example of how a project that could, instead of asking, they just did it. It's like, oh my God, are you serious? The CIA operated the project as a peacetime operation. This is a classic example of how a project that should have been military because it was too large to be clandestine became covert simply as an expedient. The reasoning was that in peacetime it would not be military because it was a clandestine. So it was to be directed by the CIA in typical secret team tautology. A really magnificent camera capability was developed for this plane along with an entirely new engine, and before too long, the U-2 was operational. The Air Force and the CIA went through all the motions of keeping the whole project a secret, but all over the world, wherever it was seen, the strange plane with the big drooping wing attracted attention. The minute something new in the field of advanced aviation is discovered, all the experts, intelligence, military, and manufacturing go for it, and it would have been the most unlikely that anyone who wanted to know about the U-2 did not know all he needed to know by 1955 at the very latest. Sometimes little things turn out to have a big and unexpected impact on such a project. It was known that a plane that flew so high that to have the most difficult time if the engine should ever flame out, i.e. if the flame which continually burns the fuel, should be extinguished for any one of several reasons. Since flame out was such a major concern, it was then most important that every effort be made to keep the flame burning. It was discovered that if a small quantity of pure oxygen was trickled through the engine's burners at all times, this would keep it burning and the danger of flame out would be much reduced. I'm cross-talking, I'm sorry. This meant then that everywhere the U-2 operated, provision would have to be made for the availability of liquid oxygen. This gas, which is so common in its natural state, is most uncommon when liquid, and to remain liquid, it must be kept in a cryogenic state at some 240 degrees centigrade below zero. As a result, it was not easy to provide liquid hydrogen wherever the world one might wish to fly a U-2 or two. The U.S. had a job of provisioning the U-2, and it went to elaborate measures to assure the availability of liquid oxygen. Although the movement of these planes and their crews and other special paraphernalia was most highly classified, and no one had thought to classify the movement of these special quantities of liquid hydrogen. Not too many people were actively involved in the movement of this most volatile material, but it did require the special efforts of a good number, and they soon realized that every time they were asked to deliver some liquid nitrogen into a certain remote area, that the U-2s would be would be operating there. To a lesser degree, the same was true of the crews. There were a special breed of Air Force personnel who had agreed to be sheep-dipped and then had taken civilian jobs in the program. This altered status from military pilot to civilian pilot made them stand out everywhere they went, because somewhere in there a more closely knit clan than that of a fighter pilot. Once others saw them in Germany or in Japan, the fact that they must be flying something special could scarcely be hidden. Their old buddies knew they were not about to be flying some charter airline slow transport. Thus, it was that even the pilot situation made concealment of the project very difficult. At this point, the U2 project, under the very capable Richard Bizzell, became a very large and very active and really global program. However, it was still maintained as a small clandestine operation, because if it was not a controlled clandestine operation, it would have had to have been a military program, and everyone knew the military could not operate such a military program in peacetime. By this time, the ST was getting powerful enough to control major projects, and even there was no chance of calling them truly clandestine or plausibly deniable, as the old directives had said. In spite of all this, the U2s did gather some of the best information ever acquired on a gross basis. The photography obtained by the U2 camera system is in many ways still unmatched. When some really good pictures are needed anywhere in the world, even today, it is probable that the U2 will be given the mission. I had attended a meeting at the old headquarters of the CIA one day presentation on missiles. Not long after the missile gap period, the RAND Corporation had been asked to put on a full missile orientation course for top echelon officials of the government. Oh, it must be CEs. Continuing education. There was so much about this new age missiles that was not known. With all the emphasis the government brought to bear in that field, it was realized that not too many top military officers and other high officials knew much about these new weapons. Oh, apparently you don't go to CEs. And the new technology involved in their manufacture and operation. However, I, as a dental hygienist, am required to do CEs. That makes sense, doesn't it? When RAND had this course ready to go, that excellent organization decided to give it a dry run for the benefit of the instructors and the administrative staff who would support it. A list of officers was made for the purpose of attending this dry run, and I happened to be one of those selected attending this dry run, and I happened to be one of those selected. The course was excellent and later was given to a great number of people. When the whole curriculum, properly censored, was entered into the congressional record. Many unusual things happened during those missile gap days. Having just returned from this course and having attended a meeting with the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence, who at the time was General Cabell, I got into a discussion with him about the advisability of having certain high-level CIA officials take that course. In the discussion, and more or less to make my point, I suggested that the CIA ought to move their cameras from the cockpit of the U-2 into the nose cone of a missile in order to place them in a surveillance orbit. I doubt that I could claim to have originated the idea. Really? Yeah, you did. But only a few days later, he called me and asked that I see about getting some spaces in the course for officials from the CIA. Not too many years later, the satellite observatories were a fact. Because of the height at which they orbit the Earth, their pictures require very special treatment. But they did have the advantage of taking pictures through very clear space until they reached the heavier layers of the atmosphere and the weather below. However, on the score, they have no more trouble than high-altitude aircraft, because most of these obstructions are no higher than 60,000 feet. The principal problem with these use of satellites is that they enter a fixed orbit as soon as they are launched, and they transit certain predetermined sites on a rather random schedule. Nothing can be done to change this orbit and the schedule they fly. They are put in orbit. There could be some limited repositioning by using additional bursts of rocket power to accelerate or decelerate the satellite. As a result, satellite observation from any given platform will not suffice to take a picture of any target at any time. The pictures must be taken at a time determined by the prearranged orbit and the time of day or night, and with some consideration of the weather. But these problems are being overcome, and it may be possible to get some information from almost any part of the Earth at any time, day or night, whether or not the weather as the canopy of observation platforms increases in size, scope, numbers, and versatility. Missile technology places a great responsibility upon the agency to collate all information from so many sources and capabilities. The readout problem is massive, and once these data are put in some readable form, they must be indexed and made accessible through some form of retrievable system. Looks like I'll be rewriting this book so some other people can read it and understand it. As we pass from an era of agent activity into a new era of machine technology, there should be a little information we need that is not available to us at all times. With this as a firm prospect, the responsibility falls upon the system to prepare the data properly and to disseminate it as broadly as possible. There is a tendency within the intelligence community to overclassify and hold information from all but a few readers. As a result, much that would be useful to many is never known at times, known in time or at all. This tendency must be corrected and put to work for the country as a whole. A free society cannot remain free if information is locked from it by its own government. So looks like I'll be doing a lot of working, a lot of rewriting, a lot of reading, because even those of you who are literary agents and stuff, you don't understand this as it should be understood. Anywho, services of common concern and attempt at efficiency. The fourth duty of the agency is to perform for the benefit of the existing intelligence agencies such additional services of common concern as the NSC determines can be more efficiently accomplished centrally. These are the functions that serve all the components of the intelligence community and can best be undertaken centrally. To more or less sum this up, the principal responsibility of the agency is to gather information that relates directly to national security. The distinction is made between informative and intelligence. Intelligence refers to information that has been carefully evaluated for accuracy and significance. The difference between information and intelligence is the important process of evaluating the accuracy and assessing the significance of such information in terms of national security. In this context, when a raw report has been checked for accuracy and analyzed and integrated with all other available information of the same subject by competent experts in the particular field, it is finished intelligence. When, in addition, it represents the conclusion of the entire intelligence community that it is national intelligence. Well, that's kind of like a double negative, though. I'm just saying. Because it says the distinction is made between information and intelligence. Intelligence refers to information that has been carefully evaluated for accuracy and significance. However, we know the CIA is corrupt. Just saying. The difference between information and intelligence is the important process of evaluating the accuracy and assessing the significance of such information in terms of national security. So there's a lot in here, actually. I could probably write a billion novels with this book. Let's see. The difference between information and intelligence is the important process of evaluating the accuracy and assessing the significance of such information in terms of national security. Is it worthy of, it's like, is it have to do with national security? Is it significant enough to be national security? In this context, when a raw report has been checked for accuracy and analyzed and integrated with all other available information of the same subject by competent experts in the particular field, it is finished intelligence. So all these different people are checking facts, seeing if it's effective in national security, which is all this Baptiste, it's like Baptiste inquiry and stuff. So that's the intelligence. But they make it seem like it's so challenging when it's life, because it's all the game of government. It's just different kinds of reactions of people, which is all fake. Because you guys aren't very good at people. That's why you work for the government. When in addition, it represents the conclusions of the entire intelligence community, then it is national intelligence. When, in addition, it represents the conclusions of the entire intelligence community, then it is national intelligence. So basically they have to get the clearing from all the different people that are involved. And then it becomes national intelligence. That I need to evaluate a little bit more. There's something about the word national intelligence. Oh! I think it becomes collective consciousness, belief systems. That's how they do it. That's a big deal. So, for example, the trans thing that everybody's talking about, national intelligence would be everyone across the country and the globe believing that trans is a sex. Because the CIA said so. So they take information from here, and they take intelligence from here, and they take, what's the other information? So they take information from here, and then intelligence information from here, and then everybody has their 2 cents in it, and they get it all analyzed for accuracy. And then it becomes finished intelligence, and then it becomes national intelligence, and then they go to work on that. And that's how they get the mind manipulations and stuff. So let me go back to the beginning of the chapter, what it's called. And that's also in the sense of war, it's the belief system. It shall be the duty of the agency to advise, to coordinate, to correlate, and evaluate, and disseminate, and to perform services of common concern, is the name of the title. Dang, you're smart. He's so smart. So I've really just been kind of getting we're going to have to read this book again when we do an analysis. Because what I've been doing is I've just been getting the gossipy stories of the overlayer. Like the lying and how they work together to lie, to D. And then I know if I go through this again, there'll be more in-depth discovery of things like what I just uncovered here on how the CIA works. But maybe y'all already know this stuff. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I could have swore the Central Intelligence Agency, I mean, I guess I just don't understand what they're for, aside from mind manipulating people. However, you could shift it. No, I don't know. I don't want to talk about this. I did my chapter. I finished the chapter. Okay, I'm going. Bye.